Marilyn Monroe only exists on the screen.
Blonde is the new Marilyn Monroe movie starring Ana De Armas and is directed by Andrew Dominik. This film is a fictional story on the life of Marilyn Monroe. Ever since the movie has been announced, the movie has been drowned in controversy. From the NC-17 rating and exploiting Marilyn Monroe's actual trauma to the over-sexualization of Marilyn Monroe, and the film not even being a biographical story of her, really shows how Hollywood is going into a really dark path. But before we begin, subscribe to the YouTube channel right there. I post a lot of movies and short films, and as well as talk about movies and stuff. And also, make sure you watch our award-winning second feature-length film, The Hollywood Dream. You can click right there on the top corner to watch it right now. But yeah, let's talk about Blonde. First things first, one of the things that was really distracting about the movie is the fact that it is shot in different aspect ratios throughout. The movie was mainly shot in a 4:3 aspect ratio, but some scenes, some clips actually, are in a 21:9 aspect ratio, which was really confusing to me. I guess what the idea was is that the 4:3 aspect ratios are scenes that are with Norma Jean, and the 21:9 aspect ratios are Marilyn Monroe. What I mean by that is that, if you guys don't know who Marilyn Monroe is, or if you guys don't know this, Marilyn Monroe is a fake name, a stage name. Her real name is Norma Jean. So what I guess the idea was that is that the 4:3 aspect ratio would represent the person, and then the 21:9 aspect ratio would represent the stage name. Like, you would see Marilyn Monroe, the person, and Marilyn Monroe, the Hollywood star. And I'm making these associations because 4:3 is typically the aspect ratio filmmakers use if they want to tell a more personal story, a more character-driven story. And 21:9 aspect ratio is more of a Hollywood movie theater, cinema scope, like epic movie aspect ratio. So that's why I'm making these comparisons and associations. But whatever the case is, it was really distracting to go through these different aspect ratios pretty much randomly. It seems random, you know what I mean? On top of that, as I was watching the movie, it didn't feel like, they never advertised this as a biographical story, but it kind of makes you wonder, why didn't they make it a biographical story? Like, I don't get why they had to tell a fictional story of this real person. Like, if you wanted to go the fictional route, you could have done a Tarantino and alternate the history. Like, I don't know this for sure, but if Monroe was actually abused and taken advantage of in Hollywood, which I'm pretty sure she has. I don't know. I don't know much about the person, but so I can't really claim that. But if she was actually, gone through that stuff, then it would make sense to tell that story, and then in the Tarantino fashion, make her a superhero, make her fight back, make her be this, like, superhero type of character. Kind of like Cliff Booth and Rick Dalton in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
You are...
I'm the devil, and I'm here to do the devil's business.
No, I was dumber than that. Something like Rex.
God, shoot him, Tex!
Tex!
Or the Americans killing Hitler in Inglourious Basterds. It would have been better if they wanted to fictionalize the real story. They could have done it the Tarantino way, instead of just pretty much writing a fantasy story with this real life person. So yeah, it makes zero sense why they chose to go fictional instead of actually telling a biographical story of this person. I know this movie is based on a fictional book, but the fictional book is just fantasy, so I don't know why they chose a fictional book where they could have just done a real story. It makes zero sense. And on top of that, there was a better movie about Marilyn Monroe called My Week with Marilyn. Go watch that movie if you really want to see who Marilyn was as a person. To pretty much sum up the film, you could say it's a pretty looking film, but it's not a pretty film. Like, the movie is shot well, there's a very good score. Ana De Armas acted amazingly as Marilyn Monroe. Like, it's crazy how she nailed it, but she did. But everything else was trash. I hate to be mean, but that's kind of what it is. So yeah, It's a pretty looking film, but it's not a pretty film. Now let's talk about how bad of the implications are with this film being released and with the people watching this movie. Now, say what you will, like people can say they hate this movie and then go ahead and hate watch it. But at the end of the day, Netflix is seeing this as views. So that means they, the producers, everyone will see the view count, will see how many people are talking about the film, which will encourage them to make even more films that are NC-17 exploitative films. And the whole rise of exploitative films is getting to a very, very serious issue because we have the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard movie that's coming out, which makes zero sense because, first of all, the trial just happened earlier this year, so there's no reason why people would want to watch the movie if they can just Google what the trial was about, you know what I mean? And serial killer movies is a big victim of these exploitative films, like the, Ted Bundy movie and the Jeffrey Dahmer thing that just came out on Netflix. These are very, exploitative. Like, a lot of people love watching serial killer documentaries and, true crime stories, so that's why there's a market for that. But at the same time, you gotta understand, real people are involved. You gotta take extra care when it comes to these sensitive topics. But corporations, Netflix, and my future employers, they don't care about that stuff. So that's why they just make these stuff and just put it out. Because I heard the victims of the Dahmer case were unaware and weren't even consulted that there's that series that came out. And yeah, the Blonde movie is pretty much gonna be the highlight of exploitative films, like the resurrection of exploitative films. Blonde will be the face of that because it's a very popular movie, like popular as in a lot of people know about it, and there's a lot of over-sexualization of the character. I'm not saying that's the real person, I'm calling that a character. Marilyn Monroe, the character in that movie, is over-sexualized, exploited heavily. Now, in my opinion, I don't think this movie would have been made had EUPHORIA not have been as popular as it became. Because EUPHORIA Season 1 and Season 2, you can watch my review of Season 2 right there, but Season 1 and Season 2 is very exploitative with their female characters. There was this article where Sydney Sweeney says that there was a lot more nude scenes that had to get cut down because it wasn't necessary for the scene or the character. But my question is, why was it even written if it turned out to be unnecessary? The director Sam Levinson has another show coming out with The Weeknd called The Idol, and that one, based off the trailer, looks very, very exploitative. It looks like it's going to be another over-sexualized story, like the female characters are going to be over-sexualized, there's going to be a lot of nude scenes, a lot of sex scenes, and it makes zero sense. Since Blonde is going to be a #1 movie on Netflix, that will encourage a lot of people to make more NC-17 movies that don't deserve the NC-17 rating. Most people don't make NC-17 movies anyway because, back then, putting out an NC-17 movie would restrict its theatrical run. So they would decide to cut down on the violence and the nudity and everything to get at least an R rating. But with Netflix being so accessible and is more based on streaming numbers, NC-17 movies have better shots at being streamed very highly on streaming services. Blonde will accidentally prove to producers that it's actually beneficial to make NC-17 movies. And to be honest, every single story in the world does not need to be NC-17 rated. At least my approach when it comes to making films is tell the story and then get rid of unnecessary crap. So sex scenes, nude scenes, extreme violence, stuff like that. I try to, strip those away, which most of the time it's possible to. Now, the filmmakers behind this movie can argue that this movie is trying to bring awareness to sexual assault and the trauma, but it's one of those movies that doesn't work like that. There's a movie that came out a long time ago called Bombshell, and that movie was also trying to show how sexual harassment and sexual assault happens in the work field, especially in whatever news network that was. I think Fox News, whatever. But there was this one scene in that movie where the chairman of the show, of the network, sexually harassed Margot Robbie's character. Margot Robbie lifts her skirt up because that's what the chairman, the head, wanted her to do, even though it's very illegal to do that. But as she pulls her skirt up, the camera lingers on that body part, and it makes zero sense because yes, you're trying to bring awareness to sexual harassment, sexual assault, but at the same time you shot the scene and you took advantage of the actor that's playing in that scene. So, it's a double standard hypocrisy right there. So it makes zero sense. And Blonde is just that, but for 2.5 hours. To wrap it all up, if you really wanted to tell the story of Marilyn Monroe, if you really wanted to explore the trauma that she's gone through and tell her life story, fictionalizing it and exploiting her and over-sexualizing her and all of that was just disrespectful. That's what it is. Because at the end of the day, this is a real person that lived on this earth. And you exploited her. She was exploited during her time, when she was alive, as well as now. It's just not cool to make movies and shows like this. Some of the best movies of all time are not NC-17 rated. Some of the best movies of all time don't exploit their female characters. To make a movie that's very much exploitative and over-sexualizing a real person, I don't know how it got made. It tells the trend that Hollywood is going at. It really does, especially because Blonde is becoming a highly viewed movie. It's leading Hollywood down a bad path.